This is Tired Metalhead Weatherman. Hopefully, you guys have had a good Sunday so far. Video number 2 again. I forgot how many days in a row we've been doing these daily doubles, but hey, as long as there's active weather going on, I'm more than happy to do them. But, anyways, I mentioned in the last video, link will be in the top right corner, by the way. But I mentioned in the last video that there was a severe weather threat. There are ongoing storms right now, actually, but we'll go ahead and touch on that real quick. Then we'll also go ahead and go over the latest update on Ian. And what we have found with that is very surprising. And we'll get into that in just a second, as I mentioned. So, two marginal risk areas here, actually. First one is towards the western half of the Great Lakes Basin. This includes Milwaukee, Green Bay, and central Wisconsin here. It's just a little bit further north of Chicago. Main threat here is wind and hail. Well, wind really. The biggest threat with both of these systems is going to be wind for the most part. But over here towards the Mid-Atlantic and parts of the Northeast, where we have New York City in play, Philly, Baltimore, DC, Richmond, and the slight risk, you do have a very off chance of a tornado within 25 to 50 miles from a given point. And it's not quite Boston, but I'd say just to the east of Boston, there's a 2% chance. Not saying that it can't happen in Boston either. I've seen some crazy things happen before. But as I've said before, the main threat with both of these areas is going to be the wind. We have a small shear section over both of these areas that is about maybe 40 to 50 knots apiece. More than sufficient enough for hail. And this is at the mid levels of the atmosphere, right where you would expect those downbursts and such to be. There is a very marginal hail threat around the Mid-Atlantic and even towards the Appalachians here. Not the most impressive lapse rates I've seen based off the models I looked at a little earlier, but the threat's there. We'll go ahead and take a quick look at the Cape values and then take a look at what the radar might look like for these areas, and then we'll go on to Ian. And the newest HRRR has just finished uploading here. We have all 18 hours. Just gotta let it load like so, and now we begin. So we start out. So really, I don't see super high Cape values even, to be honest with you. I mean, the highest Cape values of anything are over towards Tennessee and Kentucky, eastern Tennessee and Kentucky to be exact. And even then, they're not super impressive. They're about maybe 1,500. You might see a spare area of 2,000. In fact, the further south you go, the higher the Cape values, but the environment's less favorable for storms. Move this along, and I mean, right off the northeast coast here, you have a few thousand to 1,500 joules. It's kind of kissing the shoreline, but by that point, the storms are probably going to be well on their way out. And that's really going to be the end of that. So maybe a few more hours of storms. Hard to say what happens next, but there are a few ongoing severe thunderstorm warnings. We won't really get into that. This isn't going to be a big outbreak or anything like that, so I'm not super worried about it. Take a look at the storm coverage real quick. We'll go over the reflectivity, just to get an idea of what we could be looking like over the next few hours once this loads. We're still getting a lot of traffic on these websites, so it's going to take a while for these to load at times. But here we are. I mean, we can clearly see clusters of storms hanging around the Northeast and around the Great Lakes, heading into the late evening and overnight hours. By this point, though, I am thinking that they are going to start to drop below severe limits, probably by about 9 o'clock, maybe 10. Move this along. And then probably going into Monday, we're just going to be dealing with a few showers, maybe another chance of a marginal risk around this area. there is a marginal risk for both Monday and Tuesday. May go over that tomorrow morning, I may not. It depends on what happens with Ian. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and look at Ian, and what we have found here may shock you, actually. Ian has actually weakened a bit. We have had the winds downgraded to 45 miles an hour. It was at 50 at the 2 o'clock advisory, and the central pressure has gone up from 1,001 millibars to 1,003. Interestingly enough, though, the forward speed has started to slow down as well. It was sitting at 14 miles an hour earlier today. Now it's gone down to 12. So, interesting stuff going on here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the satellite. And also another interesting thing to note here is that the track has started to shift a little bit back towards the east. If I remember correctly, I do think that ridge that's set to steer this storm into the Florida coast here. They're starting to hone in on the idea of it being a little bit further to the east than expected. I think it was going to be a little bit more to the south and east. Now it's a little bit further north, I think. It's gonna be one of those hair trigger type forecasts, I get the feeling, because we were already expecting this thing to start to strengthen by this point, and it's done the opposite of anything. We put this in motion here. We'll just wait. We gotta wait for it to do so, but we put this in motion here. You can still see that the storm is struggling. Like if you look at even on the northern end of it, you could see that it's struggling with what looks to be some dry air from what I can see. Like you see this little clear slot right here that's supposed to be around the front part of the storm. Yeah, that's dry air making its way into the storm, and it's interfering with it, and then it's just a mess of convection, no real organization on the right side of the storm. So this storm is just not breathing out well at all. The circulation's there, but just this mess of clouds here is messing with this whole storm. So the intensity forecast right now, I mean, I don't know. I might just throw that out the window and say I really don't know at this point. It's kind of a confusing situation here as to what's going to happen next with this thing. I mean, model guidance indicates that this is going to undergo rapid intensification. I still agree with that, but how intense will it get? What is the time frame of landfall? All of that's pretty much getting thrown out the window at this current time. We'll have to see what happens next. Over the next 24 hours is going to say a lot. So by the 8 o'clock or 11 o'clock advisory, I'm expecting this to re-strengthen a little bit, but again, I wasn't expecting it to weaken, so this is going to be one of those back and forth forecasts. So pretty much, if you're north of Miami, if you're to the north and west of Miami, keep your eyes on this storm. If you're towards the Florida Panhandle, keep an eye on the storm. Even Biloxi, Mississippi, and Mobile, Alabama, you guys might want to watch this too, because I mean, literally, it's a toss-up as to what this thing may do. And also, I want everyone that's watching this video to keep in mind that this cone only represents the center of circulation. The storm will stretch out much bigger than that because it's increased in size. There's a lot of cloud cover, but it's just not healthy right now. It's just kind of perplexing. It's going to be a really frustrating forecast. So this is definitely one you don't want to take your eyes off of. Let's see what the two top models have to offer here as far as forecasts are concerned. We're going to start with the Euro first. And so far, from what I've seen, the Euro has maintained that same track that it's been maintaining the entire time. West Florida towards Tampa is most susceptible to a landfall right now. It's kind of hugging the west side of the state and then working its way up to the north. This also looks like it kind of gives me the impression that it's going to linger a little bit longer too. But this happens earlier into the week, and then we get into Friday and Saturday. This takes a little bit longer to move out before getting pushed out by the following weekend. Becomes a little bit messy. This forecast is getting a little bit messy to deal with. But simply put, the Euro outlook right now leads to a greater flood threat for the inland southeast, and before it gets kicked out to sea. Get over here getting distracted by the NASCAR race and the NFL games while I'm making this video. I apologize. All right, so let's go to the GFS now, and GFS is still kind of has that little bit of a bias to a more westward landfall, maybe towards the Panhandle, but it is kind of making a slight jog to the east now. But this moves out a little bit quicker than what the Euro is showing. Well, actually, no, it's about the same. But this could make potentially 1 or 2 landfalls depending on where it ends up tracking, because Tampa's right about here if I remember correctly. And then a little bit further up coast, we're looking at areas like Pensacola, Apalachicola, Destin, so to speak. So we could be looking at a double landfall type scenario. Some very so this is going to be one of those, like I said, this is going to be one of those hairpin type forecasts where no one's really able to get a good grasp on what it's doing until it actually does it. So take all of it with a grain of salt. There's no real point in looking at the spaghetti models right now, simply due to the fact that, well, the storm isn't doing anything like what we were expecting it to do. It looks like it's going to continue to be that way for a little bit. But that's weather for you. Weather people can often be wrong, and this is what's happening right now. Just keep track of it with us, and just, I guess, enjoy the ride, and hopefully everyone comes out of it without too much problems. But yeah, this is the end of this video, and I guess I'll try to make another one in the morning. But this has been Tire Metalhead Weatherman. I'll see you guys soon.